The visual experiences that Ron was talking about is one aspect of that. Another element and aspect of that has got to be doing things a little different. I said before, you're being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. And we're being asked to do it for a different kind of user than we've ever had before, right? Not only is information everywhere, but our audience, our users in our organizations, they're everywhere too, right? They're much more accustomed now to going and collecting data on their own and surfing information in a connected and online fashion and mashing it up and combining it together and in creating and publishing information on their own, as I know some of you are out there doing right now as you're blogging, right? People are now used to this. It's the norm. They work in a different way. If we just focus on traditional BI methods, and don't get me wrong, we continue to focus on traditional BI methods more and more. But if we just focus there, all we'll be doing is more of the same with the less that we have. We absolutely have to make a change and bring a new class of experiences to users in the way they work with information and discover it in their everyday work. If we don't, someone else will. That guy will. You guys know who this guy is. You do. This guy is that power user in your organization that keeps a copy of Excel and Access in his little tool belt right next to his hammer and his screwdriver, and when a problem can't get solved another way, he goes and figures it out. We've talked about this guy before. This guy gets involved when someone like the HR department actually wants to take information inside the organization, let's say internal line item salary data around how you pay different classes of workers, and combine that with external data from industry that helps them to understand how and if they need to rebaseline certain pay scales. What happens? Well, HR comes to IT and says, hey, got this project we want to do. We're going to add a lot of value to the business. Can you react to it? We know it wasn't really in the plan. And IT is quite busy and can't respond. Or if IT can respond, they've only got access to partial information. You only have your own salary line item information in your systems of record. You may not have that external data sourced anywhere. And that becomes a challenge. And the cycle goes on. And this is where that guy gets involved. That guy has a bright idea. That power user in the organization will not be stymied and goes ahead and finds a way. That individual grabs that external information somewhere off the internet or a feed that they get, gets a buddy in IT to give them the connection string, and knows how to get to the source information and mash up a solution on their own. And what happens is the solution that gets built, very often in Excel, gets shared with a lot of other people. IT ends up out of the loop. But HR is pretty happy. And that application goes on, and HR continues to be happy, and IT in many cases continues to not know that this application exists until the day something actually goes wrong, right? And when it goes wrong, it's a bad day for somebody. And typically, it's a bad day for you in IT. That individual's not around to take care of it. Now, in the past, we've vilified that guy. We've talked a lot about how that guy is the purveyor of spread marks in our organization, how that guy contributes to the sharing of information via email, how data becomes stale in the environment, how data decays over time as people use it in a very disconnected way from its originating corporate sources. But you know what? That guy is not all bad. That guy or that gal is actually really effective. That guy or gal is a domain expert who has the contextual knowledge to very quickly respond to what comes up in the everyday business of the organization and have an impact on solving everyday problems. That individual is savvy enough to know how to do basic, simple cleansing of data, match things up, and generate some very sophisticated visualizations directly in his or her tool of choice. And that tool of choice is typically Excel. So that guy's not all bad. And we ought to think about the environment that guy operates in. That guy has actually become the go-to guy for a large number of information workers in our everyday organizations. And how many of them are there? Well, our own studies say there are roughly 500 million information workers out there in the organization. And that guy, the power user, is one of them. In the past, we've tried to outlaw that guy. We've ignored that guy. And we think, you know, they're a 4%er. We're going to focus on everybody else. We're going to ignore that individual. Maybe they'll go away. Have they gone away? No. Right? In fact, they're still out there potentially causing trouble, and on the other hand, getting some great things done. And let's look at what 4% is. That's a big number. We've been trying to ignore and outlaw a pretty powerful workforce. And I say it's time for us to reach out and get that guy, that gal, and everyone else like them working with us towards that common goal of bringing BI to everyone. That is what managed self-service is about. That was a driving force behind this release of SQL Server 2008 R2, and a lot of the focus of what we did even in Office 2010 and Excel. What we've done is focused on two constituencies. You've got to add value for everybody to bring two audiences together. And the value we're talking about adding for that power user and the information worker in the organization is a new form of agility. The capacity for them to solve problems on their own, as they already do anyway, but do it through some more compelling and connected user experiences that we're going to show you in just a moment. It's about agility on that hand. On the other hand, we talk about the value for you, the IT professional and the BI practitioner. You need the ability to actually have some oversight and governance over what occurs in the organization. And I remind you, it's occurring anyway, whether we're observing it or not. And you need to gain some insight into how your data is being used, who's using it, and how popular and how often these solutions are being accessed. There may be things out there you should be proactively managing that you're not. And that is what Power Pivot's about. It's about both the end user and the IT professional or BI practitioner. And so we announced recently that we'd continue our investment in very familiar tools, SQL Server, SharePoint, Excel, and expand them to really support not just traditional BI scenarios, but also this notion of managed self-service, really giving people new experiences working with data. On the one hand, we've introduced what is now, we've retired the name Gemini as a code name for the project, and now we're calling it Microsoft SQL Server Power Pivot for Excel and Power Pivot for SharePoint. And it just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? You can just call it Power Pivot. We've built all of it on that foundation that you already know. And I think that sets you up pretty well to take advantage of some of the things that you're going to see as we move forward right now. So, to give us a little tour of that value for the IT professional and the value for the end user, I'm going to invite back to the stage the distinguished engineer from Microsoft working on BI, Amir Netz.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Amir. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys. Again.
Let's hop over here to the monitor. We'll go ahead and drive the keyboard and mouse, and let's maybe give people a little tour of the end user value and IT value.
Yeah, so we are actually going to show you here today a new way for end users to create rich BI applications on their own, on their desktops, and then how easily they can share it across the organization. And then we're going to take a tour at the kind of insights, controls, power that IT gains from those user-created applications.
That sounds great. Let's jump in and get started.
Okay, so imagine that I'm one of those guys. I'm a power user in the business unit. Excel is my tool, and I need to do this analysis. And I know asking for IT will take a while, and I have a bunch of information that IT doesn't have. I'm going to do it all by myself. And when I'm in Excel here, I find now, in Excel 2010, I find this new tab called Power Pivot. And Power Pivot allows me to do a bunch of things that I couldn't have done before. I'm going to go in and I'm going to use Power Pivot to collect the information from all sorts of sources in the enterprise. And I can bring data from everywhere. I can bring data from all sorts of databases. Just look at the list of sources. Everywhere. If you have an ODBC driver, if you have an ODB driver, I can bring the data from there. I can bring the data from analysis services everywhere, right? Text files. I can collect the data here. I already brought a bunch of data from the corporate data warehouse sitting in SQL Server. You can see I have here about 6 tables here. Yeah. These are, my organization sells media online. We sell movies online. And we see here the 6 tables that I brought from the corporate data warehouse. And some of those tables are small, like the box office one. And some of them are much larger. This is the transactions of the sales that we have. And I'm zooming in for you to see how many rows we have here. We have over 100 million rows sitting here in Excel on the desktop for me to use. And working with 100 million rows, and again, I'm not connecting here now to a remote data source. This is happening on a laptop right now. Working with 100 million rows is as easy as working with 1,000 rows. I'm just scrolling through 100 million rows. You can see it here.
That's
right?
great.
I can sort, I can filter, so I just sort by the retail price from the largest to the smallest, from the smallest to the largest. I will do some filtering. Let's just find the sales will be made in Great Britain pound. And it's only, you can see only
2 million?
2 million out of the 100 million. It's just immediate. Actually, the small delay you see here is just redrawing the screen. The query itself takes milliseconds to run. It's incredibly powerful.
It is incredibly powerful, Amir. You know, when I show this to others sometimes, and I know it happens to you when you do it as well, you know, sometimes people think there's a bunch of trickery involved, or maybe there's some magic. What underlies this that's really giving us this kind of breakthrough performance?
So there is a magic here. It's the magic of software. And what we have here underneath this technology is, first of all, we have a version of analysis services running in process in Excel. And in that version of analysis services, we introduced a new technology. We call it VerityPack. And that's an in-memory column store that's running inside analysis services. It's compressing the data incredibly well. Let me just show you. We have here about 20 gigabytes of data that we brought in. I'll show you the file that is actually containing all this data once it has been compressed. Then go to the desktop, and you can see here, this is the file. This is the file we're working on. 133 megabytes. 100 million rows, 133 megabytes. You just do the math. It's 1.3 byte per row that we have here. Okay? Wow. Incredibly compressed.
That's great.
And that compression allows us to do all these wonderful things.
So that's important for the user experience and allowing people to navigate the data quickly. But you know, what kind of enrichment can they do?
Well, first of all, bringing the data just from the data warehouse is not enough. Mm-hmm. What they need to do, you know, users, as me, as one of those guys, I am always collecting data from all sorts of sources. Sometimes I have access to the relational database, and sometimes I need to go to other sources. And everywhere I see some data that I can use, I bring it in. So often I will find data that is very hard to reach in the relational database, like very hard to get into an SAP system. But having a report that is based on an SAP system is very frequent.
Sure.
And I see here a reporting services report that tells me the royalties that we pay to the various studios for the movies that we sold online. And you see this small icon here, and I want to zoom in, and it says export to data feed. And Pablo yesterday talks about those atom feeds, those data feeds. And every report in reporting services can be set to have its underlying data exposed as a data feed. And the moment I have it exposed as a data feed, I can go and say, I want to open it, and I want to bring it into my Power Pivot application. I just press OK, and I'll go through this very quick wizard. What it does, it's actually going and finding the underlying data source behind the report. So the data set the report was using, it's not a screen scraping. We're not trying to parse the HTML. It's actually the underlying data source. And we bring it in. And what you see here is that we have a new table, the royalties table. This is the data set that was feeding into the report.
Right.
And not only that we brought it in, it's now a live data source. That is, I can go in, and every time I choose to, I can go and say, I would like to refresh it. And we'll go back to reporting services, ask reporting services to re-execute the query, give me the freshest data, and then I get this freshest data, and my report will always, my application will always have the latest version of it. Okay, so we have it here. We have the royalties. Not only from reporting services, everywhere. One of the most common places where me, as that guy, will have the information will be in my own Excel spreadsheets. So let me just go back to Excel, and let me switch to a small table I created here. See, this is a table that has a set of countries and country codes. I typed it in myself because I had these currencies that we filtered on. I want to know what country they correspond to, and I have this unknown with an A. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a link table, and I'm going to add that table to my model. So now we have this additional table in Power Pivot. I'm going to switch back, and this is a link table. So it means that whenever I go and update my Excel in any mean, so I'm going to say unknown, and changing the NA to unknown. Whenever I'm back to my Power Pivot, you'll see that the system automatically refreshes itself and gives me the latest version of the information. Great. Just always live data from the reports, from Excel, from the data warehouse. So I'm collecting here all this data. Okay?